Welcome to Focus, a show that focuses on community, unity, and service. I'm your host, Mark Warnock, and today we're going to focus on the New England Air Museum. We're going to talk to Stephanie Abrams, the president and CEO of the organization, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the Air Museum. Then we're going to take a quick tour with Nick Hurley, the curator for the Air Museum. He's going to show us a little bit about what they have here at the Air Museum and some new things they have coming up in the future. So let's go check out some planes. All right, we're here with Stephanie Abrams, the president and CEO of the Air Museum.
Yes,
so thanks for having us. I've been here many times when I was younger and a couple times since I've been older, and it's amazing and it's awesome. And every time I come here, you guys got new stuff.
Yes, we do. It's changing all the time.
It is. So tell us a little bit about, for people who don't know, tell us about the Air Museum.
So the New England Air Museum is home to over 100 beautifully restored military and civilian aircraft. But we also have beautiful exhibits. We have New England Women in Aviation. We have a Kosciuszko Squadron 303, which was the Polish squadron that fought in the Battle of Britain, unsung heroes who are incredible. New exhibits coming up on Tuskegee. We have augmented reality. We have flight simulators. It is just a place where people can experience the excitement of aviation.
So tell us a bit about if people are looking to get involved or to even come down to their museum, how would they go about doing that?
The best way to get involved is to come visit us. There is something new all the time. And again, we have the new flight simulators. So we have an F-18 simulator, same as in Top Gun, so people can actually have the experience of flight. And again, something like our B-29 Super Fortress is enormous. My father was a crew chief for one, and every time I kind of get chills when I walk by it. But we have a Sikorsky flying boat. We have an Electra, which is two tail numbers off of Amelia Earhart's aircraft. We have the control car for a blimp. If the blimp was on it, it would fill the entire hangar. We have so many exciting things to see. You can also volunteer. We're always looking for docents, and we're looking for restoration volunteers. All of the aircraft, they come in often looking like they came from a boneyard. And they end up looking like they came rolling off of
the aircraft
an assembly
carriers.
line.
Everywhere,
and those are all of our restoration volunteers. So for people who love to tinker and love to restore aircraft, please come see us. And also, we're always looking for docents. But again, I would say come visit us because there's so much going on here.
And to do that, they just go to your website, which is?
Our website is www.neam.org.
All right, we'll also put that on the screen as well a bunch of times.
NewEnglandAirMuseum.org.
Yeah, and I'll let you know I did try the simulator and I crashed almost instantly.
Yeah, so do I. That's okay. But it's also fun to roll and then crash.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I did. I rolled a couple times.
Did you land on the aircraft carrier?
No, I ran right to the ground. I ran right to the ground, I didn't get that far. Kind of tall. Legs didn't really help out.
Yeah, kind of short. Still didn't do it.
I was like, oh man, the wedge is in here. But so tell us a bit about, we talked about the volunteering, and you guys got some events coming up. I know you just opening up a theater coming up soon.
Yep, we have a new exhibit on the Tuskegee Airmen. It's called the Tuskegee Airmen, Their Untold Stories. And the more that we got involved with this, the more, we're just pouring our hearts and souls into this exhibit. It's about the Tuskegee Airmen who were black pilots who flew during World War II. And they fought two wars, essentially. They were fighting for a country that still had Jim Crow laws. They were fighting the enemy, and they were also fighting against racism and discrimination. And yet, with focus and determination, they flew with extraordinary skill. So at first we thought we were going to just tell the story through their children and their grandchildren and their friends, but we've actually had several of the original Tuskegee Airmen here. 98-year-old Harry Stewart, who won the first Top Gun competition, 97-year-old George Hardy, and Enoch Woodhouse. Anyway, their stories are incredible. So we're having a fundraiser on April 1st to raise money for the exhibit. So we will have 4-star General Lloyd Fig Newton, yes, he calls himself Fig Newton, is our keynote speaker. Then we also have George Hardy, 97-year-old, one of the original Tuskegee Airmen, and then 2 children of airmen who have incredible stories. Gordon Smith's father, Luther Smith, actually crashed and was taken prisoner in Germany, and did eventually come back.
Yeah.
But these stories are poignant and compelling. And so April 1st is a fundraiser, so please come and join us. It'll be an incredible evening. And information is on our website, again, www.neam.org.
All right, so that's all the stuff that's going on there. We're going to meet with Nick, who's the curator
Yes, he is.
of the museum, in just a few minutes, and we're going to take a quick little tour of the Air Museum. So stay tuned for that here on Focus. And now we're here at the Air Museum. We're here going to do a quick little tour with Nick Hurley, the curator of the Air Museum.
That's me.
So tell us about how you came on board with the Air Museum and how you got involved.
Yeah, so I started here as full-time curator in 2019, January of 2019. So I've been here about 4 years now. Before that, I was actually a volunteer, and before that, I was an intern. So I've been with the museum in some capacity since 2015. And I was just really lucky that they had an opening in the curatorial department about the same time as I was looking for a job. And I kind of hit the ground running, and I've been working ever since to really just make the museum an even better place to visit. You know, we have a really fantastic aircraft collection. You know, we have over 100 in the collection, and about 60 are on display at any one time. What I was brought on to do was really bring our exhibit program up to that same level of quality as our aircraft collection is already known for, which, you know, we've been pretty successful at. Behind us here is the Command exhibit, which opened in 2018, the new and improved version with digital technology, a couple AR experiences. And then we also have our New England Women in Aviation exhibit behind us here, which is our newest exhibit that opened in March of last year.
All right, now I know that you're saying how many planes you guys had. You guys had even more planes.
Oh, yeah.
But in the 80s, I remember, like, I think it was 79. I was born a month before it happened.
Yep.
The tornado came through, and you guys lost some major planes in that tornado.
We did, unfortunately. So the tornado is, you know, you can't tell the history of the New England Air Museum without talking about the 1979 tornado. We had a very large collection. A lot of them were displayed outside just because of their sheer size. And yeah, in less than 10 minutes, it was an F4 tornado, a very rare occurrence in the state of Connecticut. It tore kind of right through our outdoor display area. So when it was all said and done, we lost about 23 aircraft that were just either completely destroyed or too badly damaged to save. Thankfully, we did not go out of business thanks to that. We were in the process of moving to this location already. So we kind of just accelerated that plan. And 2 years after the tornado, we opened on this location in '81 with our first building. And then we slowly rebuilt the collection from there. So as I said, you know, now we're at the point where we have just over 100 aircraft, and we have about 60 on display at any one time.
So any planes from that era that are still in the museum?
Quite a few, actually. If you walk around the museum, you'll actually see a few aircraft that are what we call tornado survivors. They either, you know, sustained very light damage, or in some cases they were pretty heavily damaged, but our volunteers were able to restore them back to their former glory, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, oh, that's crazy. It's crazy to know that there's planes that have, I mean, I know a lot of the planes are from way before that. But
you know,
the
they've
fact
seen
that
a lot.
been through just not even after they've flown, they're still around for that amount of time.
Absolutely.
So you're saying our first thing we're going to go into, right now we're in the big hangar, but we're going to head into the New England Women in Aviation. Tell us a bit about that as we head that direction.
Yeah, so right now we're standing in the military aviation hangar, you know, named for the military aircraft that are here. What we'll do is we'll go through the New England Women in Aviation exhibit into the civil aviation hangar, and then the B-29 hangar after that. So, you know, all told, we have about 100,000 square feet of exhibit space in 3 hangars that are open to the public. But again, the New England Women in Aviation exhibit is our most recent installation, just opened in March of last year. And it really was a complete redo of this hallway. So before, it was just kind of a connector between the 2 hangars, a little bit of wasted space. So we knew we wanted to tell this story, and we thought this was a really good high traffic area to put this exhibit, because everybody that comes to the museum has to walk through this corridor if they want to get to the second hangar.
Well, let's take a look.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, so now we're in the Women in Aviation exhibit. So tell us a little bit more about this exhibit and what you guys got in here.
Sure. So this was the largest exhibit that we kind of ever worked on at the museum. So it's a pretty ambitious project. Took us from start to finish over 2 years to complete, you know, between fundraising, writing, graphic design, and then actually installing it. one of the things I'm really proud of about this exhibit is that we're able to offer kind of a multi-sensory experience. So everybody engages with this material in a different way. Some people love the images. Some people will read every bit of text. Others really like the artifacts, and some respond to video. So we have all of that here in the exhibit.
Yeah.
So there's a little something for everybody. We were really fortunate to have some original artifacts from some of the women that are featured in this exhibit, which really just enhances the display quite a bit. One of the really nice pieces that I like to point out is actually in this case over here, and it belonged to a woman named Mary Goodrich Jensen, who was the first female licensed pilot in the state of Connecticut. Her goal was to see an exhibit like this in a museum someday. She passed away in the early 2000s, but a friend of hers, Peggy Loeffler, was actually the woman that worked with me very closely on this exhibit and brought the idea to the museum. So in addition to bringing the idea, Peggy brought a lot of Mary's items with her, and one of them is her pilot's license. Now that's cool enough to begin with, because it's a very early pilot's license, but the really cool part is it's signed by Orville Wright, one of the Wright brothers, which is a pretty common practice at that time. So it's just a really, people really recognize that name.
Yeah.
They may not know a lot of the other women featured in the exhibit, but they know the Wright
That connection to the history is amazing.
Exactly. So that really gets them hooked, and then they kind of make their way through the exhibit and learn a lot about these incredible women.
Yeah. So what other stuff do you have in the exhibit besides just that? What other stuff is in here that you got?
So the exhibit itself actually runs chronologically on this wall. So we start in the very early days of aviation, pre-Wright brothers, hot air ballooning. And then we move through powered flight, the golden age of aviation where we're standing right now, into the World War II era, and then post-war, and then finally into the space age. And in each section, there are women who played a prominent role during that time. Again, from the earliest hot air ballooning pioneers to, some of the first female astronauts that are, working with NASA. The really great thing was when we opened this exhibit, we were actually able to have some of the women here for the opening to see their likeness in the exhibit. So that was really special. That was really great to see.
That's amazing. So let's take a look at one of the other things in this exhibit.
Sounds good.
All right, so we're here at the end of the Women in Aviation exhibit, and here's you guys have the AR thing that Stephanie was telling us about before we did her interview.
Yeah.
That you guys have. This is the person that was involved in that?
That's correct. Yeah, so this is pretty cool. One of the other things that we're trying to feature in our exhibits now is what we call digital interactive technology. Again, some people really love the analog stuff, the imagery, the text, but other people, especially some of the younger audiences, appeal more to the digital side of things. So this is one great example of how we've introduced that in an exhibit. David Newman, Dr. David Newman works at MIT. She's working on the next generation spacesuit for our astronauts called the biosuit, which is what that is there. So, you can read about it, you can see the image, but if you see those QR codes down at the bottom, what you can do is actually take your smartphone, snap a picture and actually put yourself into the biosuit. So it'll come up on your screen.
Yeah, she showed. Yeah, it was amazing. It's crazy.
Right. So, it's a way for kids to kind of, visualize what it looks like. Dr. Newman's voice actually does the voiceover that comes up and describes the suit a little bit more. So it's just a nice touch to, an already great exhibit and an already great story.
Now to add to the AR stuff, you guys all have the thing Stephanie was telling us about the gears on the floor that you guys have, where you actually the person pops up and explains to you the different aircrafts in the big room over there.
That's another great example. So yeah, in our command exhibit, we have targets on the floor where we call it a virtual docent. So basically, if a docent's not around to tell you about something, you can scan the target. They'll kind of materialize up out of the floor like Star Trek, and they'll give you a brief overview of whatever artifact you're standing in front of. So this is a great way to, again, leverage some technology, tell a little bit more of the story that we may not have been telling previously.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So now we're going to move into the Lippincott. Is I'm saying that correctly?
Yep, the civil aviation hangar.
Civil aviation hangar. And we're going to look at more planes, because why not?
Yep, exactly.
So now we're in the civil aviation hangar.
Yes, we are.
So the plane we're standing in front of is ginormous.
It is.
What is this?
So this is arguably the centerpiece of the civil aviation hangar. This is the Sikorsky VS-44 flying boat. It's significant for a lot of reasons. It's the last fixed-wing aircraft that Sikorsky ever built. It's the last 4-engine commercial American-made flying boat left in existence. And it's just an incredible story in terms of Connecticut aviation history. So this was built in the late 1930s, one of 3 that were built by Sikorsky for transatlantic voyages. Really a high level of luxury for that time period. Most Americans hadn't been on an airplane before, but the ones that were lucky enough to get a flight on one of these enjoyed a pretty high standard of luxury, during their trip. They served during World War II, carrying mail VIPs across the ocean to Ireland. And then the 2 that survived the war spent quite a few years in civilian service. This is now the last one of the 3 that's in existence. So we were very lucky to acquire it back in the 1980s, and it took about 10 years to restore it to what you see here today.
Wow.
This is a fully restored aircraft inside and out. So visitors get to see not only the outside, but what the interior would have looked like if you were on a flight in the 1930s. So really, really incredible aircraft that we have here. But
So
it's
this is-
just one of many.
Yeah. So this is kind of like people who are younger and don't really know, like transatlantic, that's kind of like the Concorde of the day kind of thing.
Kind of, yeah. It's a good way to look at it. I'd say the biggest difference between this and a Concorde is this was way slower.
Yeah, slower, yeah.
And the less glamorous side
Yeah.
of transatlantic travel during that time period was they were flying very low. So when you're flying low, you're flying with the weather.
Yeah.
So it could be very bumpy.
Yeah.
And not a super comfortable
Yeah.
ride. At certain points during the trip.
Yeah.
But again, it was built with comfort in mind as much as it could be back in the day. It had soundproofing. It had a heating air conditioning system.
Wow.
Had a full kitchen. Had a stewardess on board. So
Wow.
for that time period, it was really one of a kind.
That's crazy. So what other stuff do you guys have in here? I see like a P-51. I see a bunch of other planes here. What other
Yeah.
stuff do you guys got?
So like I said, this is a great aircraft,
Yeah.
but this is just one of many that we have.
Just
in
the tip of the
hangar.
iceberg, as the kids would say.
Exactly. So the civil aviation hangar, again, not surprisingly,
Yes.
focuses on civil aviation, commercial aviation, air racing, and a whole host of other topics. The P-51 that you mentioned behind me is one of 4 racing aircraft that we have on display as part of our air racing exhibit. We also have, across the way here, we have our Lockheed Electra. Now, this aircraft, it's painted as a Northwest Airlines aircraft, so it's, commercial aviation. But what this aircraft is particularly well known for is being 3 serial numbers away from Amelia Earhart's Electra.
Yes.
Amelia Earhart, obviously, being the famous aviator who disappeared over the Pacific flying her Electra. So we've had a lot of interest in this aircraft because of that. We also have our Douglas DC-3, talking about commercial aviation. This is, when you think of golden age of aviation, a lot of people think of the DC-3. It was an extremely popular aircraft, very advanced for its time. And this is another example of a full restoration that our volunteers have done inside and out. So it's a really incredible piece. And then, mixed in with all that, we have some of the earliest examples of, aircraft, this 1909 Blériot, not something I would want to fly in.
No,
but,
yeah, it looks like it.
but it gives you a sense of just how brave these early aviation pioneers had to be to sit in the cockpit of something like that and fly it across the English Channel. And then we also have early aviation engines to, again, give people a sense of what the technology of the time looked like and, how things developed, from year to year. Behind the VS-44, we also have our Sikorsky exhibit, which is actually going to be renovated completely starting this year in celebration of the 100th anniversary of Sikorsky.
Wow.
So the exhibit as it sits right now focuses a lot on Sikorsky the man and his achievements and really everything that he produced during his lifetime. And of course, we have a few Sikorsky helicopters as part of that exhibit to help tell the story. Awesome.
So here's a question I'm thinking of as I'm walking around.
Yeah.
How do you guys come about getting these?
That's a good question. That's a question we get a lot. It varies. So some of our aircraft are on loan, either from the military or from a private owner or from another museum. A lot of them were donated to us back, 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And even then, they came to us in various states of, completion. So some of them were in really rough shape when we got them, and then we had to do a full restoration before they could be put on display. Some of them were flown to Bradley Airport and then decommissioned and towed over here to the museum. So they were, essentially display ready.
Yeah.
Once they were, not made airworthy. So it varies, but most of the aircraft we have are the property of the museum. They were donated or purchased by the museum, and they are part of our permanent collection.
Yeah. So this isn't the end of the museum. There's still way more stuff.
Yeah, we still got a whole nother hangar.
There's a Super Fortress sitting around here somewhere that I had to check out. So let's go take a look at that.
Hard to miss.
Yeah. Let's go check that out. All right, so now we're in the Super Fortress hangar.
Yep.
And it's called Super Fortress for a reason. This thing is ginormous.
It is. It's huge. It's got about 141-foot wingspan. And, the really cool thing about this aircraft is there are only about 20 of these left in the entire world.
Wow.
So, the museums that you would think of, the Air and Space Museum, the Air Force Museum in Dayton, they have examples of the Super Fortress.
Yeah.
But we do too.
Yeah.
So, the Little New England Air Museum in Windsor Locks, Connecticut.
Exactly.
This really puts us on the map for that reason. The other really incredible thing about this aircraft is, again, this was another restoration project done by our volunteers. So this is arguably one of the best preserved, best restored B-29s in the world because it's an inside and out restoration. The goal with this restoration was for it to look like the crew had just parked it and walked off the airfield. And I think our volunteers accomplished that and then some. This actual aircraft was delivered too late to see combat, so it did not serve in World War II. It was primarily a training aircraft for most of its career, and then it was actually brought down to Maryland for, it was going to be used for weapons testing. They were going to use it for target practice, essentially.
Yeah.
So the museum was able to rescue it before that happened in the early 70s and brought it up here. They reassembled it. It sat outside for some years. You talk about tornado survivors. This is a tornado survivor. It received some damage during the storm, but thankfully it survived. And in the late 90s, they began working on the restoration. And in the early 2000s, the B-29 was complete enough that they brought it in here to the hangar, which they built, kind of specifically for the 58th Bomb Wing and the aircraft. And they were able to dedicate this new exhibit.
So besides just having a Super Fortress in here, this is also the location for the new exhibit you guys have.
Yeah.
The Tuskegee Airmen exhibit, which is off to the side here.
Exactly.
Tell us a bit about what you guys got going on there. I know Stephanie said it's going to open, the theater part opens in April and then the rest opens later on.
Yeah, so the whole exhibit opens on June 3rd. And, I mentioned earlier that the New England Women in Aviation exhibit was the biggest one that we had done in the museum's history. Well, this one's even bigger. So we keep trying to outdo ourselves with every new exhibit. This is a really important story for us for a lot of different reasons. One of our board members from many years ago was a Tuskegee Airman. He was actually one of the first 5 Tuskegee Airmen.
Wow.
So there is that personal connection to want to tell the story.
Yeah.
But, just on a wider scale, there really aren't any commemorative sites for the Tuskegee Airmen in the New England region. Most of them, understandably, are down south or in the Midwest.
Yeah.
So we want to be able to bring this story to an audience that may not be able to get down to Alabama or out to Detroit to see the museums that are telling this story.
Yeah.
So we're really excited. It's been a lot of work, but the response has been really incredible from the general public, and we're really excited to see it open.
So you have like a little display over there about what it's going to be inside the exhibit, but what actually is going to be in there that people might be able to take a little preview of what people might be looking to see in June.
So the exhibit opens when people walk in, the first thing they'll do is enter a theater. So it's sort of a semi-enclosed theater. There'll be a really short 8-9 minute introduction video, just kind of priming them for what they're going to see in the exhibit, giving them some background on who the Tuskegee Airmen were. And then once that exhibit, or that video is done rather, they're going to walk out of the theater and into the wider exhibit. So we'll have 4 display cases that feature original artifacts from the Tuskegee Airmen. And then the walls will actually have just kind of a series of themed areas. So it's not so much of a chronological story about the Tuskegee Airmen, but more of a thematic approach, talking about, again, who they were, the challenges that they faced, and what they accomplished in spite of those challenges, and kind of how their legacy still continues on today. And looking back now at the Tuskegee Airmen, what their contribution was. So I think people are going to really like it. I think they're going to learn something. I think it's going to spark some discussion. And people are going to walk away from it really having a great understanding of, who these men and women were and what they did.
All right, so now as we wrap up the tour, We carried everything that flies in the air and up in the stratosphere. Now we're going to finish up. You guys do have a space exhibit.
We do, absolutely. So this is, just as big a part of the story of aviation as the other aircraft that we've seen, especially because there's a local connection. So Hamilton Standard, obviously it's not Hamilton Standard anymore, but I still call it Hamilton Standard.
Yeah.
It's a homegrown name. It's right across the way here in Windsor Locks. They've been a huge part of the space program really since the beginning, supplying hardware and really serving as one of the primary subcontractors for the Apollo era spacesuit, which is what you have behind you here. So we're lucky to have a selection of artifacts, mostly from Hamilton Standard, related to that subject. We have a few different spacesuits on display. This one is actually an original that's behind you here. This is Apollo era. It was worn by astronaut James Irwin, who was on Apollo 15. So this was not worn in space. This was his backup suit. But it's a great example of, the time period, the kind of technology they were using. And, this is something that we want to expand going forward because we are honoring the past, but we're also looking into the future. So, what Hamilton is still doing for the space program and all the new technology that's coming out, we hope to eventually feature that in the museum.
So very cool. So yeah, so all this is here at the Air Museum. Come on down, check it out.
Yeah, come see us.
See Nick. He'll be more than happy to give you a tour. I'm sure he will, because I just told everyone he's going to.
That's right. That's what they pay me for.
So come see Nick at the Air Museum. Thanks again for your time.
Thanks, man.
So I want to thank Stephanie, the president and CEO of the Air Museum, and Nick, the curator, for taking us on a tour of this awesome Air Museum. You guys definitely need to come down and check it out. We're going to end this show right here in front of this Hamilton propeller exhibit, which actually was a little bit of it was put together by one of our coworkers, his dad's. So a little nod to him on that. And yeah, stay tuned next time for more here on Focus.